evening, Acadiana. It is Monday, March 15th, 2021, and you're listening to Local News Live, a production of AOC Community Media in partnership with the Acadiana Advocate. Their team of journalists print the stories important to our community and state, and we are happy to read you some of those stories. You can hear Local News Live Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. on AOC 1. The AOC Community Media channel on YouTube, and on Cypress Street Radio at aocinc.org/csradio. You can find the print versions of these stories and more at theadvocate.com. We couldn't bring you this community service without the generosity of our volunteer newsreaders. Today, we're joined by Phyllis Grifford. Welcome to Local News Live, Phyllis. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to get out of the way. I know we have a lot of headlines. I'm going to go listen on Cypress Street. Thanks again for reading.
Sure. In Acadiana, a badly burned pit bull mix receives a second chance. Pooch gets cutting-edge treatment by Sarah Pagones, staff writer. When Sadie arrived at Dr. Dina Lodato's recently opened veterinary surgery clinic in Covington a couple of weeks ago, it was hard to be optimistic about the outcome. The year-old pit bull mix had been burned over 70% of her body when a heat lamp ignited straw that her owners in Lafayette had put in her kennel during February's brutal cold snap. Her owners couldn't afford large veterinary bills and surrendered the pooch to the Humane Society of Louisiana. After being treated initially in Lafayette and then at the Mendeville Small Animal Hospital, Sadie was brought to Lodato's practice, research, veterinary surgical specialists, and rehabilitation. Lodato has a hyperbaric chamber at her clinic, which is used in wound care. But the treatment Sadie ended up getting was even more cutting edge. Dr. Nicole Kapari, a burn surgeon at the University Medical Center and Louisiana Children's Medical Center, was asked if she would be willing to try a specialized treatment used for burns on humans called RECELL on a four-legged patient. Quote, "I absolutely jumped at the opportunity," Kapari said. Quote, "I recently acquired a dog, a 1-year-old puppy, and I love dogs," end quote. The treatment involves taking a small sample of skin from the patient, in Sadie's case from her shoulder, and placing it in a device where it is enzymatically broken down. A manual scraping is then performed, and the sample of skin is broken up into millions of individual skin cells that are sprayed over the entire wound, where it promotes healing, growth, and repigmentation far faster than a normal skin graft, Kapari said. Approved by the Food and Drug Administration for humans in 2018, Kapari called RECELL a game changer for burn treatment in people, although it had never been used on a dog. Avita, the company that makes RECELL, donated a device for Sadie's treatment. But when Kapari first saw Sadie, Lodato said she expressed doubts that the patient would survive. About 75% of her burns are second degree, but the rest are third degree. RECELL works very well with partial thickness burns, Kapari said, but Sadie had areas that were torn down to the muscle and even some with tendons and bones exposed. Quote, "I didn't think she would make it through the first treatment," Kapari said. Besides the extent of her burns, Sadie had puppies before the accident, and she had arrived somewhat malnourished from the demands of nursing a litter. Healing from burns creates a high metabolic demand that Kapari compared to running a marathon. But the prospect of saving some of Sadie's skin made the effort worth trying. Sadie has had 2 RECELL treatments and is doing remarkably well. Quote, "Her eyelashes are starting to grow back and her eyebrow whiskers," end quote, Lodato said. She is on heavy antibiotics to prevent infection, the biggest risk for burn patients, and tolerates daily bandage changes with patients. Quote, "I'm amazed at how much she's already healed," Lodato said, stroking Sadie's front leg as the dog cuddled in her lap. "Her will to live is strong," Lodato said, and despite everything she's been through, she's still sweet-natured and gentle. She's also found her way into the hearts of Lodato and Mike Richard, the clinic's practice manager. After about a week, Lodato was sitting on the floor after Sadie's dressings had been changed. Quote, "She walked over and plopped down in her lap," Richard said. "She found her person." The couple plans to adopt her and have her join their menagerie of 4 dogs and 5 cats. Kapari and Lodato also hope that Sadie will someday be able to make visits to children who are being treated for burns as a source of encouragement. Kapari also marveled at Sadie's sweet disposition, but she said she heard from Lodato that the patient had barked at the UPS driver last week. Quote, "You've got a puppy acting like a puppy again," she said, adding that when pediatric patients start to get, quote, "lippy," that's a sign they're feeling better. On March 20th, the clinic at 641 River Highlands Boulevard will hold Sadie Day from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. to give people an opportunity to see Sadie for themselves and consider making a donation to the Humane Society of Louisiana to help other animals like her, Executive Director Jeff Dorson said. The group spent about $5,000 treating Sadie before Lodato and Richard adopted her. Otherwise, the cost would have likely doubled, he said. But Sadie has already given back. Quote, "She's inspiring me. Things could always be worse. Don't give up," Lodato said of what she has learned from her patient turned pet. Quote, "She hasn't given up, so we haven't given up." Sharonton man dies in Sunday morning crash, crime blotter, Advocate staff reports. A Sharonton man died early Sunday in a crash on Louisiana 87, troopers said. Alvin Joseph Trosclair III, 50, died in the single vehicle crash, according to a statement from Louisiana state troopers. The initial investigation by state police revealed that the crash occurred as Trosclair was driving east on Louisiana 87 in a 1994 Ford pickup. For unknown reasons, Trosclair's vehicle ran off the roadway to the right. After leaving the roadway, the Ford overturned and struck a tree, causing Trosclair to be ejected from the vehicle. Trosclair was unrestrained at the time of the crash. He was pronounced dead at the scene by the St. Mary Parish Coroner's Office. Impairment is unknown, but a standard toxicology sample was obtained for analysis. This crash remains under investigation. Arrest made in Kaplan house fire. The state fire marshal's office on Saturday announced the closure of multiple cases and arrests, including the investigation into a residential fire in Kaplan. Kyle Leger, 21, of Hesmer, in Avoyelles Parish, was arrested on Wednesday on one count of simple arson. Leger allegedly set fire to his ex-stepfather's home on Canty Lane in Kaplan. That fire occurred on March 7th, according to the state fire marshal. An additional suspect, a juvenile, was also arrested. The state fire marshal's office also made arrests in the following cases out of Bogalusa and Jonesboro. Derek Slocum, 62, of Bogalusa, was arrested on Tuesday on one count of criminal trespassing. During an investigation into a house fire located in the 900 block of Mercedes Street in Bogalusa, It was determined that Slocum had been living in the vacant home without permission. Charles Scott, 32, of Jonesboro, was arrested on Thursday on one count of simple arson for setting fire to the home he was renting, located in the 200 block of Forest Drive in Jonesboro. The fire occurred Wednesday afternoon. Here's your PSA break, public service announcement. United Way of Acadiana is offering free tax preparation. The United Way of Acadiana is offering free tax preparation services through its Volunteer Income Tax Assistance, VITA program. The program provides low and moderate income individuals and families with free, reliable assistance with filing federal tax returns. There are 12 filing locations participating this year throughout the Acadiana region. Most locations are by appointment only due to COVID-19 safety restrictions. Visit unitedwayofacadiana.org/VITA for site locations, opening dates, and to make appointments. For additional resources, visit myfreetaxes.com to learn more about alternate free or low-cost filing options currently available. The VITA program is just one way the United Way of Acadiana is working to help individuals and families to achieve and maintain financial stability. Learn about additional programs by visiting unitedwayofacadiana.org. Julia Letlow picks up the torch. Best-known Democrat Christoph competes. By Tyler Bridges, staff writer. Julia Letlow had just begun processing the December 29th death of her husband, Congressman-elect Luke Letlow, from COVID-19 complications, when she was confronted with a monumental decision. Would she run for the vacant seat in a mostly rural congressional district that her husband had just won? Half a dozen male Republican elected officials were eyeing the race. Meanwhile, Letlow would face questions about whether a single mother with 2 toddlers could handle the constant travel to Washington and throughout the 24-parish district, which sprawls from Monroe to Alexandria, from Opelousas to St. Francisville to Bogalusa. Letlow announced her decision on January 14th. She would run, quote, to pick up the torch that my husband left behind, as she explained it Tuesday to members of the Amy Rotary Club. Quote, I've never been more sure about a decision since the day I married Luke, Letlow said in an interview afterward. Quote, I'll go back to my faith. I needed to have that peace that this was the right decision moving forward. I've never felt more ready, more equipped, more determined to serve, end quote. Now, Letlow is heavily favored to win the 5th congressional district seat, either outright in the March 20th primary or in the April 24th runoff. State legislators designed the district a decade ago to elect a Republican such as Letlow. Her husband cruised to victory in the December 5th runoff, winning 62% of the vote. He died at 41, only days before he was supposed to take his seat in Washington from a heart attack while receiving treatment for COVID-19. Julia Letlow, who will turn 40 on March 16th, seems well positioned to run. She grew up in Monroe, has a PhD in communication from the University of South Florida, and was a finalist to be president at the University of Louisiana at Monroe last year while serving as a university vice president. She knows the district well through her husband's work as chief of staff for former U.S. Representative Ralph Abraham and from his campaign to succeed Abraham, who retired last year. Julia Letlow had raised nearly $700,000 through February 28th, the last reporting period, with the top Democrat having raised only $70,000. On Wednesday, former President Donald Trump announced his support for her. Like her husband, Letlow is running as someone who wants to make a difference in the lives of her constituents in one of the poorest congressional districts in the country. She's anti-abortion and a strong gun rights supporter, but she is not running as someone who wants to score political points with hard-edged commentary that would win her face time on Fox News. Quote, "I want to get results for the 5th District," she told the Rotarians in a meet. Quote, "I will work with anyone who will help me get results. I don't care what aisle I have to cross over," end quote. The district includes the soybean, cotton, corn, and rice farms of Northeast Louisiana, the cattle ranches and timberland of Central Louisiana, and the dairies of the Florida parishes. Many of them depend on federal price supports to one degree or another. The district is home to Grambling State University, Louisiana Tech, and the University of Louisiana at Monroe, and also to Lumen, a Fortune 500 company previously known as CenturyLink. Pentecostal churches dot the district, with a concentration along Interstate 20 in the north. In a 12-candidate field, the best-known Democrat in the race is Candy Kristof, a 53-year-old social worker and addiction counselor in Alexandria. She won 16.41% of the vote in the November 3rd primary last year, falling 429 votes short of winning a spot in the runoff against Luke Letlow. Quote, "We need jobs and affordable health care," said Kristof, who has the endorsement of the Louisiana Democratic Party. Kristof said she would have voted for the Biden administration's $1.9 trillion economic relief package that passed the House on Wednesday and became law with the president's signature on Thursday. Not a single Republican supported the measure. Kristof said she supports expanding health care through the Medicare for All program championed by Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont. She wants, quote, "to make sure we are able to transition our people into clean jobs," end quote, but does not explicitly endorse the Green New Deal plan championed by the U.S. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York. She says she would have voted to impeach Trump in January. Quote, "I believe he caused the January 6th insurrection," Kristof said. "I believe he was instrumental in gather people at the Capitol and overthrow the government. If President Obama had done the same thing, I would have voted the same way," end quote. Another Republican candidate is Alan Gillary, who owns a trucking company in Opelousas and won 7% in last November's primary. Quote, "I want to help our economy move again," Gillary said. "Our farmers are struggling. Our kids have to get back to school." Letlow was introduced at the Rotary Club luncheon at Mike's Catfish Inn by a man who told a joke first. Quote, "Did you hear about the guy who was hit by a can of soda? He was lucky. He was hit by a soft drink," end quote. Letlow joined the rest of the crowd in laughter. Tall and thin, she was a state long jump champ in high school. Letlow took a spot behind the podium, Having taught public speaking, she was comfortable talking to the crowd despite being a first-time candidate for political office. Letlow talked about her steadfast religious faith and how she had been tested before. Her brother Jeremy died at 17 in a car accident when she was a junior at the University of Louisiana at Monroe. Quote, "That tragedy was really hard to walk through," Letlow said. Quote, "But I find what I do whenever I'm faced with trials and hard times, I dig into literature and research," end quote. But she found little to read for siblings who had lost a brother or sister. So she decided to fill that gap by making it the subject of her doctoral dissertation. Quote, "Giving Meaning to Grief," she titled it. She sees what she went through with her brother's death as preparing me for such a time as this, she told the Rotarians. Letlow moved on to her priorities: improving education, fixing roads, bridges and sewer systems through a massive federal infrastructure bill, making sure that farmers receive the aid they need from the government, and expanding broadband internet service in rural areas. Her call for government intervention in the economy made her sound something like a Democrat, but no one in the crowd raised any concerns in their questions. One man, who seemed dismissive of politicians, asked whether she supports term limits. Letlow said she did, but would not limit herself to a set number of terms as Abraham had done, retiring after he finished his third term last year. Quote, "The way the swamp is set up now, it's all about seniority," she said. Quote, "If you term limit yourself, then you don't get those committee assignments and you can't bring as many results back to the 5th district," end quote. Afterward, Letlow talked about Luke. They met when he was in 9th grade and she was a grade lower at a different school. But they didn't become high school sweethearts, she said. They reconnected later, broke up, reunited in 2012, and married the following year. They had 2 children, Jeremiah, 3, and Jacqueline, 1. The kids live with their mother on a farm in Start, a town in Richland Parish, just east of Monroe. Gillary told the Monroe News-Star in January that the 2 children would suffer from her time away campaigning and in Washington if Letlow wins. Letlow said she didn't consider the comment to be sexist per se, but she also smiled and added, quote, "I don't think it's a question often asked of men," she noted. Quote, "It takes a village to raise children. I have parents on both sides," end quote. Letlow said she would have voted against impeaching Trump, and she agreed with the decision of the Louisiana Republican Party's executive committee to censure U.S. Senator Bill Cassidy for his vote in favor of impeachment. She said she would have voted with her fellow Republicans against Biden's economic relief package. She said she would fight any plans to carve up her district when the legislature meets later this year to redraw the congressional boundaries. Quote, "If you redistrict this district, then the rural population will not be well represented," she said. Letlow was virtually the only person in the crowd at Mike's Catfish Inn who wore a mask. She said she would prefer that everyone wore one, but she didn't make it an issue. She had received her first vaccine shot 3 days earlier. Quote, "It was emotional," Letlow said. "I won't lie, just thinking about its life-saving capabilities, I wish it had been here a little bit sooner," end quote. Today in History by the Associated Press. Today is Monday, March 15th, the 74th day of 2021. There are 291 days left in the year. Today's highlight in history. On March 15, 1965, President Lyndon B. Johnson, addressing a joint session of Congress, called for new legislation to guarantee every American's right to vote. The result was passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. On this date, in 44 BC, Roman dictator Julius Caesar was assassinated by a group of nobles that included Brutus and Cassius. In 1493, Italian explorer Christopher Columbus arrived back in the Spanish harbor of Palos de la Frontera, 2 months after concluding his first voyage to the Western Hemisphere. In 1820, Maine became the 23rd state. In 1913, President Woodrow Wilson met with about 100 reporters for the first formal presidential press conference. In 1944, during World War II, Allied bombers again raided German-held Monte Cassino. In 1964, actor Elizabeth Taylor married actor Richard Burton in Montreal. It was her 5th marriage, his 2nd. They divorced in 1974, remarried in 1975, then divorced again in 1976. In 1972, The Godfather, Francis Ford Coppola's epic gangster movie based on the Mario Puzo novel and starring Marlon Brando and Al Pacino, premiered in New York. In 1985, the first internet domain name, Symbolics.com, was registered by the Symbolics Computer Corporation of Massachusetts. In 2005, former WorldCom chief Bernard Evers was convicted in New York of engineering the largest corporate fraud in U.S. history. He was later sentenced to 25 years in prison. In 2019, a gunman killed 51 people at 2 mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand, streaming the massacre live on Facebook. Brenton Tarrant, an Australian white supremacist, was sentenced to life in prison without parole after pleading guilty to 51 counts of murder and other charges. 10 years ago, the Syrian civil war had its beginnings with Arab Spring protests across the region that turned into an armed insurgency and eventually became a full-blown conflict. 5 years ago, in a major reversal, the Obama administration barred offshore drilling off the Atlantic coast. 1 year ago, the Federal Reserve took massive emergency action to help the economy withstand the coronavirus by slashing its benchmark interest rate to near zero and saying it would buy $700 billion in Treasury and mortgage bonds. After initially trying to keep schools open, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio said the nation's largest public school system would close in hopes of curbing the spread of the coronavirus. Today's birthdays. Actor Judd Hirsch is 86. Jazz musician Charles Lloyd is 83. Rock musician Phil Lesh is 81. Singer Mike Love of the Beach Boys is 80. Rock singer-musician Sly Stone is 78. Rock singer-musician Howard Scott of War and the Lowrider Band is 75. Rock singer Ry Cooder is 74. Actor Francis Conroy is 68. Actor Craig Wasson is 67. Rock singer Dee Snider of Twisted Sister is 66. Actor Joaquim de Almeida is 64. Actor Park Overall is 64. Movie director Rennie Harlan is 62. Model Fabio is 60. Singer Terrence Trent D'Arby, aka Sananda Maitreya, is 59. Rock singer Bret Michaels of Poison is 58. R&B singer Rockwell is 57. Actor Chris Bruno is 55. Actor Kim Raver is 54. Rock singer Mark McGrath, Sugar Ray, is 53. Rock musician Mark Hoppus is 49. Country singer-musician Matt Thomas of Parmalee is 47. Actor Eva Longoria is 46. Rapper-musician Will I Am of the Black Eyed Peas is 46. Rock DJ Joseph Hahn of Linkin Park is 44. Rapper Young Buck is 40. Actor Sean Biggerstaff is 38. Zodiac. Pisces, February 20th to March 20th. Pace yourself. Make sure that your ideas are doable before you share them with prominent individuals. Address challenges and put together a solid plan. Aries, March 21st to April 19th. Branch out and discover new possibilities. An opportunity to switch from one field to another will give you something to ponder. Follow your heart and take the path that offers peace of mind. Taurus, April 20th to May 20th. Put unfinished business to rest before you start something new. Find out where others stand before you voice your opinion. Information is power. The more you know, the easier it is to avoid mistakes. Gemini, May 21st to June 20th. Don't be gullible or let someone's charm lead you astray. Find opportunities and do your own thing. Learn from experience and do what's best for you. Don't take anything for granted. Cancer, June 21st to July 22nd. Patience, understanding, and affection can lead to solutions and better relationships with others. Don't give in to anger or let someone's words disillusion you. Leo, July 23rd to August 22nd. Show passion in what you pursue and make overdue adjustments. Channel your energy into new beginnings and opportunities that allow you to collaborate with like-minded people. Virgo, August 23rd to September 22nd. Think before you speak. If you want to make progress, you'll have to choose your words and colleagues wisely. Don't be fooled by empty promises. Seek out people who get things done. Libra, September 23rd to October 23rd. Refuse to let uncertainty take control. Find out the truth and proceed with your plans. Don't wait for someone to offer you something. Make your own opportunities. Scorpio, October 24th to November 22nd. A journey will tempt you. Whether it's a spiritual path, personal growth, or an opportunity to expand your creative skills, you can accomplish plenty if you are honest and committed. Sagittarius, November 23rd to December 21st. Open your mind. Observation can be an excellent teacher. Take pleasure in what others have to offer, and be aggressive in pursuing what brings you joy. Keep a healthy perspective. Capricorn, December 22nd to January 19th. Don't let anyone goad you into an emotional argument. Keep the peace, and you will bring about positive changes at home and work. A different approach to using your skills will pay off. Aquarius, January 20th to February 19th. Discipline will pay off. Utilize your space to accommodate what you do well and take on a new venture. You can turn a favorite pastime into a way to help others or a lucrative business. The horoscope, an entertainment feature, is not based on scientific fact. Feds to send Louisiana schools another $2.6 billion. Systems still mulling how to spend previous payments. By Will Centel, staff writer. Public schools are in line to get a staggering $2.6 billion from the federal stimulus bill that won final congressional approval last week, more than double the amount that schools landed in December. The announcement has set off a new wave of questions on how the aid will be used, especially because public school leaders are still grappling with how to spend the $1.2 billion approved less than 3 months ago, and even some of the $287 million authorized in March 2020. State education leaders are planning for a, quote, robust summer school used by lots of students, including full-day classes, rather than the typical half-day sessions that attract only a fraction of those enrolled. Quote, we have received a lot of positive feedback from system leaders that we intend to do that, and they have the financing available through the stimulus dollars, State Superintendent of Education Cade Brumley said. Louisiana is getting the 12th largest share of public school dollars in the nation, behind only much bigger states like Texas, New York, and New Jersey, according to the Congressional Research Service. It also amounts to $3,643 per student, Education Week magazine says. The portion of the $1.9 trillion bill for public schools totals about $130 billion. Sandy Holloway, president of the State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, said the funds are mostly aimed at addressing student learning loss during the pandemic and reopening schools. The state's 69 school districts have to spend at least 20% of the money on learning loss. Exactly how remains unclear, and craft a plan for students to return to school safely. Holloway said other possible uses for the money are the purchase of hardware and software for distance and hybrid learning, summer school and after-school programs, and repairing schools, including the installation of ventilation systems to reduce the spread of COVID-19. Legislative leaders are also pleading with school leaders to devote part of their windfall to building the infrastructure needed to expand access to high-speed internet, especially in rural areas. 20% of students rely on virtual learning entirely, about 140,000 children, and another 13% rely on distance learning in part, about 91,000 students. Another 67% of students attend in-person classes. Upgrading internet access could carry a price tag of at least $600 million, said State Representative Darrell Desitel, Republican from Hesmer, one of the leaders of the push. Quote, "We have an opportunity right now to fix our digital divide," Desitel said. "We have the money, we have everything lined up, we just have to execute," end quote. School districts may need to hire retired teachers or college students to lead classrooms for summer school. Brumley said state officials plan to create a dashboard to show taxpayers how the federal aid is used. Public schools are not the only ones in line for a major injection of federal education dollars. Louisiana colleges and universities are set to get an estimated $599 million, according to the State Board of Regents. Half the money is for college campuses and half for student grants. Another $113 million is earmarked for schools that serve large numbers of minority students. LSU is set to get about $51 million. Southern University is in line for $72.7 million, mostly because of the minority student allocation. The stimulus bill was backed by nearly every Democrat in Congress and opposed by Republicans. Dollars for individual school districts roughly tripled between the initial $287 million federal aid package approved for Louisiana public schools in spring 2020 and the $1.2 billion authorized by Congress in December. If that pattern holds, the largest school districts in the state, the Jefferson and East Baton Rouge parish systems, could land another $154 million and $128 million, respectively, from the latest bill. About 700,000 children attend public schools in Louisiana. Around 2/3 of that number live in low-income homes, which is a key reason why the state is getting such a heavy injection of federal dollars. Part of the uncertainty on how the $2.6 billion will be used, about $2.3 billion after a mandatory set-aside for the State Department of Education, stems from questions about what federal officials consider allowable expenses. Wes Watts, president of the Louisiana Association of School Superintendents, noted that the earlier federal aid was to, quote, reopen schools. even though many schools in Louisiana have offered in-person classes since August. Quote, districts are reviewing the restrictions and timelines attached to the dollars we are receiving to make sure we spend it properly and prudently, said Watts, who is superintendent of the West Baton Rouge Parish School System. Patrick Dobard, CEO of New Schools for New Orleans, said the money will help to a point. Quote, the newly passed stimulus is critical, but unfortunately insufficient to fill the financial gaps schools face in Louisiana, where funding has been flat for a decade, Dobard said in an email. He said the money can be used for academic interventions to address lost learning, to assist students traumatized by COVID-19, and help stabilize the teacher workforce after a taxing academic year. New Schools for New Orleans is a nonprofit group that advocates for excellent schools. Brumley was superintendent of the Jefferson Parish School District when in-person classes ended on March 13, 2020, because of the coronavirus. What first looked like a 2-week shutdown that day was actually the end of the school year. The sudden move to distance learning for the final 9 weeks and stop and start operations for some schools during the 2020-21 school year has raised questions on how much learning loss students have suffered. The first standardized assessments since 2019 for students in 3rd through 12th grade are set for April and May. Quote, then we will be able to get those results and make decisions, Brumley said. Quote, I would hate to speculate on what it might be. Sports. STM dials up for Pete. Broussard Cougars reflect on accomplishments of seniors by Mike Stoppage, contributing writer. As St. Thomas More coach Danny Broussard drove the basketball team's bus from Burton Coliseum in Lake Charles to Lafayette on Saturday evening, his phone was blowing up. His Cougars had just defeated University High 60-39 in the Division II state championship game, and well-wishers were calling and texting Broussard's phone nonstop. Although he didn't read any of the texts while driving, Broussard accepted several congratulatory calls from friends and family. Quote, I'll be returning calls for 3 days, laughed Broussard, whose team had just won its 4th consecutive state title. The Cougars, who hadn't lost since before Christmas, finished with a 32-4 record. Quote, when I won the first one in 1986, I was 25 years old, Broussard said. Quote, I thought this was going to be easy. I was going to win about 20 of these. I found out right after that it's not that easy. Look, to win a state championship, you have to have luck. Sometimes you need the luck of the draw. Sometimes you may have one of the best teams you've ever had, but there are other great teams in the state. There are a lot of factors that go into it, end quote. Over the weekend, debates raged on the internet as to who is the best overall basketball team in Louisiana, which crowns 9 separate state champions. Quote, this bunch right here, I feel that whatever division we'd have been in, I think we'd have won, Broussard said. I've been feeling this for the last 2 years. Last year, we beat 3 state champions. We played so many great teams. It's just a special bunch. It's remarkable, the run that we've been on. Last year, we went through a 3-game stretch where we beat the number 1 team in 3A in Wassman, the number 1 team in 4A in Brobridge, and the number 1A team in North Central. You can't plan that. You can't schedule that. It just happened in tournaments. For that to happen back to back to back, I knew I had a special group of guys playing for me." End quote. Broussard's Cougars have captured a total of 6 state titles. Quote, "We've had some really good teams," he said. It would be fun for this team to play against our first ever state championship team, our nationally ranked team that went 38-2. It would really be fun. There would be some great matchups. I've been fortunate to have some great players. I'm not going to say this team is the best I've had, but they rank up there," end quote. STM will lose 10 seniors from this year's squad, including guards Carter Domang and Shaden Shelvin. In the championship game, Domang led the way with 17 points, 9 assists, 8 rebounds, 5 steals, and a block. Shelvin added 12 points, 5 assists, 5 rebounds, and a steal. Broussard said LSU football signee Jack Betch's 16 points were a career high. Beck also collected 3 steals, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, and 2 blocks. Quote, "We were a guard-oriented team," Broussard said. "You're playing with Bryce Bouillon, who is a 6'2" post, and Jack Beck at 6'3". They're very strong and athletic, but we were always so undersized. Our guard play this year was unreal." End quote. When the buzzer sounded at the end of the game on Saturday, one of the first things Broussard did was embrace Domang and Shelvin. Quote, "It's hard for me to imagine what it's going to be like for me next year without them," he said. "We've been through wars together. It's going to be so much different. I told them I love them, and I thank them for going to war with me every night. It's just a mutual bond I have with them. Whatever I've asked them to do the last 4 years, they've done it." End quote. One of STM's most significant wins this season came a few weeks ago in the Cajun Dome against 3A champion Madison Prep. Although the Cougars fell behind early, they rallied to defeat a much taller squad, 62-55. Quote, "Appearance-wise, I don't think we're an all-airport team where people see us and say, wow, but when the ball is tipped, Jack and Bryce and Carter and Jaden start pushing guys around," Broussard said. "The opponents are like, these guys are good. And our defense, our physicality prevents teams from doing things they usually do." Once Beck joined the basketball team after football ended, the Cougars never lost again. Quote, "He's incredible," Broussard said. "The camaraderie that he has with his teammates spurred him to play football. Carter went and played football as a Division I basketball prospect, so Jack returned the favor by playing basketball after he had already signed with LSU for football." Along with Barrett Chasson, Broussard is assisted by coaches Wes and Nick Cortez. Funerals. Funerals today in the Acadiana area. May Baudouin. Walter's Funeral Home, 2424 North University Avenue in Lafayette at 3 p.m. William Pelche. Fountain Memorial Funeral Home and Cemetery, 1010 Pandora Street in Lafayette at 11 a.m. In credits. This has been Local News Live for March 15th, 2021. I have been your reader, Phyllis Grifford. Join us at 9 a.m. Monday through Friday on AOC 1, Cypress Street Radio, or the AOC Community Media channel on YouTube. You can read these stories and more at theadvocate.com and find out how to volunteer and more at aocinc.org.